I'm Kit Lyle. I'm the founder of the Operators, an online community platform for private equity backed executives. We're here today to talk about networking. And based on the number of people who've already shown up, it's just a minute after. I suspect this is going to be a useful topic. I'm very excited about the presentation. And I want to encourage you to jump in, but there's a chance that I won't be able to see you um, as we're proceeding. So just make yourself audible, take yourself off mute, go ahead and ask your question, or if you prefer to put it into the chat, Joyce, if you're willing to just monitor the chat. And as always, your presence on camera is preferable. If you're able to be on video, that'd be great. Feel free to go ahead and post into the chat, paste into the chat your LinkedIn profile and whatever other biographical details you'd like to share about what you're looking for. We used to take the time to let everybody introduce themselves, which I still think is a good idea. But given the number of people here and how excited I am about this presentation, I apologize. We'll just dive right into the details. So I'm going to start to share my screen here. And there we go. Okay, good. So if you're considering entering private equity or re-entering private equity, it has a unique set of challenges. Private equity-backed executives, in my opinion, are the professional athletes of the business world. So I often have some somewhat physical. This isn't exactly an athlete, but you'll see some other photographs as we proceed. So it's a pretty sizable opportunity. There are as many as 5,500 private equity groups. I still think that's a little exaggerated. About 9 portfolio companies per private equity group. So if we do the math, there's something like 51,000 portfolio companies. If we have 5 C-level executives on average, and maybe twice that as a tier two, you get the idea. It's a pretty sizable opportunity. So what's the problem? What's holding us all back? This is not a rhetorical question, so I'm just going to pause for a little bit and see if anybody's willing to jump in. So take yourself off of mute and share with us. No one here is judging you. No one here is going to be hiring you. So go ahead and share what is holding you back when it comes to networking. Anybody?
Well, you might be an introvert.
Introvert. Okay, good. I'm an introvert, but I figured out how to network. Anybody else?
The companies might be too busy to field all the calls from interested candidates.
So, in other words, you're concerned that they may not be receptive to your outreach. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
A lot of different methods of networking, either email, LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And where do you start? So, the problem is, I'll share with you my list. It's hard to figure out what your purpose is. Like, what is my role when I go out and network? Am I identifying myself as a job seeker or something else? Do I fit in? Am I relevant in this crowd or in this networking event or group, or am I different than everybody else who's here? Sometimes there's a feeling of imposter syndrome. We'll explain that in a second. How do you start a conversation with somebody you haven't met before? What's the goal of the conversation? What's the goal of networking in general? And then lastly, how do you describe what you do at that particular stage? So, anybody want to either add anything, add any color commentary, answer any of those questions, offer up any suggestions or anything of that nature? I prefer for these sessions to be interactive, so I ask questions from time to time. So I'll pause for a second to see if anybody's willing to jump in, and then we'll keep going.
Sure, Kit. One of the questions that I always have is, what's your goal? Is your goal Is it learning? Is it learning about something, or is it are you kind of like trying to like learn and then kind of like put it in there as like a hey, by the way, I happen to be learning new things, but I'm also looking for a new success. Or how do you kind of what's your priority for the call?
Yeah. That's a really good question, and we're going to get to that in the next slide. But I appreciate you bringing that up and sharing. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think your approach should be is what a value add can you add to the private equity group? And that may hold you back because you don't know, you're going to have to do further research. But I think that's, very important to be able to get into these individuals. Um, what is it
Yeah.
that you could do for them?
Yes, hold that thought for several slides. That's really good, really relevant. Thank you. So, what's the problem if we just take these one at a time? What's your cause? What's your purpose? What's your role? I'm quoting or paraphrasing from one of my favorite value propositions that I've heard. This is my best effort of quoting what somebody said who's in our community. And what I love about it is it's short, it's sweet, it's simple, but it demonstrates passion and interest. It's a positive. In other words, where he says, I love fixing things. I love fixing crises. More specifically, I love putting them on track for value creation and speeding up the process of exit. So obviously your value proposition or your personal brand statement is going to be different. But when you create that and you decide, okay, this is my superpower, this is my area of interest, this is my synergy, or where my experience, my skills, my knowledge, my passions all come together, when you can encapsulate that in 20 seconds, that becomes your cause or your purpose, your role for being at that networking event, or for calling on them in their office, or your outreach perhaps over email. That's really where it all begins. Now to the question about fit. In reality, a lot of people at a typical networking event or even a conference or seminar are feeling a little bit out of their comfort zone, awkward. Many people are, in fact, job seeking. And so the best way to start and help yourself in feeling a little bit more comfortable is to have that clear value proposition, as in what I have listed in that first bullet point. Imposter syndrome, the definition of imposter syndrome, since a lot of people experience it, is like, it's like, do I really fit in here? Am I in the right place? Is everybody else different than me? Am I qualified to be here? The definition is, despite all evidence to the contrary, you believe that you're not equipped or not eligible or not in the right place. So, in other words, it's your own head getting in the way. It's just the mindset. You belong. How do you start a conversation? There is a website I have cited there. You can just Google it. It was from Indeed, but essentially, if you just Google, networking questions or top 100 questions for networking events, business networking events. So the idea is to use questions, to ask, to seek. I think it was Jeffrey who was talking about, am I in learning mode? Am I in research mode? And very much so you are. We're going to talk about the goal here in a second, but other techniques or tactics in addition to asking questions of people and have those questions ready are to, you can flatter somebody. It could be as simple as, hey, I really like your tie. Where'd you find that shirt? It's nice. I like it. Um, be prepared to share. In other words, you have to be ready when they say, so tell me about yourself. What are you doing here? Be ready with a confident response. The goal of networking is not to land a job. The goal is perhaps a stepping stone might be learning, but essentially your goal is to develop lasting connections or relationships, right? So when you go out into the world to begin networking, you just have to remember, my goal is to develop a connection or a relationship that hopefully will be a lasting one. Now, there are plenty of people out there who are like, there are an awful lot of folks in the world that I just don't like, and that's fine. And I think in some cases we've all met people that we don't like. But your goal then is to just keep seeking, keep searching until you find someone you have something in common with, or that might be a useful connection for you. And of course, it ideally becomes reciprocal. You want to be able to return the favor and facilitate an introduction or be helpful for them as well, because then it feels right. It feels like chemistry, and that may not always be possible. So, but that's a start. Is the start is to believe in the purpose as developing a connection.
Kent, I might argue that in the first cause, purpose, role section, that you put in a sentence or two of specific accomplishments, whether you brought on, 100 new customers or cut, you say you're an operation-minded CFO, I've cut, X amount out, or do you think that's just too much for an initial conversation?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't want to overgeneralize and say it's too much. It's always a good idea to have the STAR principle in mind. STAR is an acronym for situation, task, accomplishment, and result. It's always best to talk in story form. So to answer your question, if you get yourself into a conversation, let's take this particular individual who said, "Hey, I'm an operationally minded CFO, got a lot of experience in educational services. And, I came to this event to share with the world. I'm looking for educational services businesses, ideally in the Northwest of the United States, that are in turnaround mode. I like fixing things. I like fixing crises. So if I could find an educational services deal that's in crisis, I really want to sink my teeth into it and start creating value." Now, if the person who I'm talking to responds by saying, "Really, that's really interesting. Tell me more. Tell me about what you've accomplished." You want to have that story ready. You don't want to recite your resume and say, "Well, from 1982 until 1988, I did this." Nobody really cares about that. But if you can turn it into a story in which you say something like, "Yeah, let me tell you about this public company I was working for a couple of years ago. The situation was my job was this. I was responsible for this. And at the end of the 36-month tenure when I was there, I accomplished X, Y, and Z. And the result of all that was we got that business sold at a level that nobody ever expected. And I'm very proud of that. So that's a good way to segue when somebody says, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more." Have that story ready. And if the story can be in a star format, that helps. Okay. So there's a lot of data on this page. There's a lot of words. Don't sweat it. I'm just going to tell you what's going on here. Knowledge, skills, experience on the left, action steps of what an operator is responsible for in the middle. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. But personality traits and behaviors are over on the right. And that's why I've got those highlighted in yellow, because even if you are currently in career transition mode, you're not working, you're just 100% focused on networking and finding your next role, your next opportunity, I wanted to give you confidence that a lot of what a hiring decision maker might be looking for is, okay, cultural alignment. Does this person have a high EQ and a low ego? Are they transparent, forthright? Are they good communicators? Are they willing to ask questions and listen? Humility with confidence. So you get the idea. So, in other words, these are some ways, these are some attributes that you probably have anyway that are easy to convey in a setting of a job search that are actually great because to some extent they're a little bit unique to the world of private equity. Not every small family business. Not every public company is looking for people with a high EQ, low ego, willingness to learn, right? Culturally, you're actually a pretty good fit for private equity when you're in career transition mode because it gives you an opportunity to be forthright, humble, convey the reality, be curious, ask questions, and so forth. We're not going to go into every one of these. We're going to cover two, and the most relevant two are your personal brand statement. It all begins there. You've already heard me say it a couple times. So your value proposition, for example, and then that leads into networking, essentially your marketing plan. But the very first step I skipped, and that's goal clarity, because I would assume that you sort of already understand what your goal is, but maybe not. So let's let's look into your goal clarity. So the first step is to be very crystal clear on what your goal is. I'll give you a few examples. Let's say hypothetically you have been head of FP&A and you may be considering being a CFO. Okay, great. So is your goal, in fact, to become a CFO? Or is your goal to be head of FP&A? Or is your goal to do maybe something else, gain some other skill set? So think carefully about exactly what it is that you want to do. Now, your reaction to that, of course, naturally is going to be to say, well, Kit, I'm narrowing by creating a goal that's that specific. Now I'm limiting myself significantly to only those opportunities that are a perfect fit. Yes, you are. You're limiting yourself. But that focus is what enables both you and the hiring decision maker to say, aha, I think we have something here. We have a really good fit. So you have to get yourself to the point that you know exactly what you're looking for. So that may not be as simple as just the role. I mean, it could be what size company is it? What stage are they in? What's the situation? What's the geography? Where have they previously been? What are the problems that are being solved for? So think about it, write it down, commit to it, be precise, be specific. It will help you. Then the next step after you've developed a good, solid goal, I mean, you can always go back. Let's say something lands in your lap that's really intriguing and compelling is not a fit for your goal. Okay, so what? You make a decision at that point. But to start yourself off on this process, on this journey, be as specific as you can with your goal. Now, the personal brand statement is another one where you want to be as specific as you can. Don't worry about what you're excluding. We want to know for certain that you are the right person for the job. Well, how is the hiring decision maker going to know when you're not in the room to convince them that you actually are the right person for the job? It's all about brand. When you think about a consumer brand, does you know pick your favorite food company, do they brand themselves? No, in reality, consumer products manufacturers do not brand themselves. But what do? They influence their customers to think of that product in the way that they encourage those customers, those consumers to think of the product. And you're trying to do the same exact thing. When someone is in a different room from you, they're in their office and they're trying to think, I'm going to give you a scenario, and this is an important one to think about. This is one of the most important little stories I'll share with you in this hour that we're together. Is this just imagine someone is looking to hire a head of FP&A and they're looking down at their desk and they're looking at their computer and they're trying to remember, who was that person that I met? Who was that person that sent me that email with that link to that article that I read? And then she was in a podcast and it was great. And she has relevant industry experience. Doggone it, she's the perfect person for this job right now. Situation, industry, role. She's got it all. Who was it? Right? And that's what you want to happen. You want them to have, I'm looking at Jackie, you want them to have this epiphany and say, oh, it's Jackie Konis. That's the person that we need. We need to get her in here to interview. Well, that doesn't happen unless you've done your work along the way to influence the consumer, right? The hiring decision maker or whomever might influence that decision, that you actually are qualified or the right fit because you've defined it, you've described yourself. So, how do you want to be perceived in an authentic way? You want to be authentic about it. It's only about 20 words. It answers your why. In other words, what are you passionate about? What are you excited about? What's unique about you? What's your superpower if you think that way? Um, why should you use a value proposition or personal brand statement? It's exactly as much for you as it is for them. Okay. So for you, it's helpful because it gives you self-confidence. It gives you control, but also flexibility. It gives you a sense of purpose when you walk into a networking event or a conference or whatever. You know, this is what I'm here for. This is my purpose. This is my reason for being. But it also is helpful for the other person because they're like, okay, I'm going to file that away. This person, industry, role, situation, got it. Okay, I'll keep that in mind, or I'll try to keep it in mind. But it does require refresh, right? Where do you use the personal brand? Where does it come into play? I'm just gonna, because I've been doing too much talking, I'll pause for a second. Anybody want to jump in for me and share where do you use your personal brand statement?
I would think anytime you're making an introduction of yourself, it's
Anytime.
yeah, it's your calling card, I guess.
Exactly. It goes with you. So essentially what that means is it ends up in your LinkedIn profile. It ends up in your resume. It's what's in your bio. It's what you say in an interview. Everywhere, anywhere. The reason for that is if we use that term brand again, you don't want brand static, right? Brand static is when, I don't know, you try to, is anybody familiar with the Cheesecake Factory restaurant? Yeah. What are they good at? You might say everything because everything tastes good there, but when you're good at everything, you're kind of good at nothing, right? So I don't mean to badger or belittle the Cheesecake Factory, but um, there was an executive coach who used them as a good example of brand static, and it's true. Like if you had to pinpoint exactly why people go there, is it for the cheesecake? Probably not. Is it for the salads? Probably not. You know, it's hard to figure out what the compelling reason is that they exist. But
I
the
think of
parking
them
lot's always full.
as a diner.
Well, they have a variety of different offerings at not outrageous prices and typically are pretty good at service and
Hmm.
turnaround. That's my feeling about them.
Yeah. So maybe it wasn't the best analogy, but you get the idea. If you say something in your resume that is in direct conflict to the brand that you're trying to build, it does create a problem for you. So you want everything to be consistent. What you say in the resume, your LinkedIn profile, what you say in an interview, it's a very consistent story so that you're helping your audience, you're helping your potential customers recognize, okay, I get it. It's very clear. When we have that need, that's the person we really need to think of. So we're going to take this logic a step further and start talking about marketing. So if we've got 5,500 private equity groups in North America, you can't conduct your outreach to all 5,500. And then when we think about the 51,000 portfolio companies, obviously it's a mess. They're just too many. So you have to find a way to logically winnow down the field and narrow them down. And it begins with your goal. So if your goal hypothetically is a CFO opportunity in educational services, to use the example from before, then you want to eliminate every private equity group that does not invest in business services or educational services more specifically. So there are some lists and databases that you can use. PitchBook is the gold standard, but it's extremely expensive, prohibitively expensive if you're an individual. Private Equity Info is a good alternative resource. Um, HubSpot is a really another good, the gold standard for personal CRMs would be HubSpot. But again, they're quite expensive if there is a free version, but it's somewhat limited. So most CRMs today have followed HubSpot's lead and allow for automated, sequenced messaging campaigns to go out via email, via your LinkedIn account, etc. So if you're looking for a CRM, really all you're looking for is something that's comfortable, easy to use, and that does allow you to organize your data. Because if we think about it, if you have private equity groups, portfolio companies, and then maybe family offices, mezzanine lenders, law firms, accounting firms, others that are centers of influence, the message that you might send to a private equity professional, a GP, might be very different than the message you send to the CEO of a portfolio company. So you keep them bucketed and separated, but the message that you send to one CEO in one portfolio company in healthcare or educational services or whatever might be just the same message that you send to somebody else in the same industry. And if that's the case, and you're comfortable with that, that sort of blast approach, if you're comfortable with it, then it's really, really nice to use a tool like a personal CRM, like a HubSpot, for example, because it facilitates that in a very efficient pattern. And then you can follow up and see how your leads are performing or see how your campaigns or your messaging is performing. Yes, John.
Yeah, are you suggesting that this kind of automated blanket approach to reaching, executives is effective? I mean, I guess when I think about myself, I get a lot of unsolicited email. Somebody wants to sell something, and those usually either get filtered out automatically or by me. And so, are you suggesting this approach is effective?
What I'm suggesting is if you had the time and the ability to target somebody specifically, it obviously makes sense to tie in. Hey, I noticed that portfolio company number three recently experienced X, Y, and Z, and I also saw an article in the Wall Street Journal that referenced you recently. So I really wanted to bounce a couple of thoughts off of you. That targeted messaging cannot be replicated 1,000 times over, obviously. But if you can't really find anything unique or different about, 20 different private equity groups or 20 different portfolio companies, and you're really struggling in that process, these CRM tools allow you to, let's just imagine you put into bracket name of company, name of individual, name of industry, and you can tailor a message that does sound like it's been specifically created for that individual. Hey, I notice you're doing a lot of investments in educational services, and I also recognize that you're in Chicago. I'd love to, pay you a visit when I'm in town next week. Well, if you can send that message out 15 or 20 times all at once with one push of a button, then maybe that is helpful for you. It's not as good as the alternative that I described first. John
Gotcha.
Ferrara, I
Thank you.
think you had the hand up first. Sorry.
So I have been told from that HubSpot and other CRMs do not allow you to do cold emails or mailings unless they're your contacts. And I've been worked with, so and I've heard it from other CRMs too, that you can't, if they find out that it's a cold mailing, that they're not your contacts because of the poor the response rate or the high bounce back rate, that they can eliminate your subscription to the service, and people won't do it. Is that
Yeah.
true?
I, I mean, there's no such thing as like the HubSpot CRM police, but if you were a gross offender and they did notice that they had a unsubscribe rate that was ridiculously high, or there were a number of complaints or something of that nature, then yeah, they'll come back to you and they'll say, hey, look, reminder, these are supposed to be people that you have already connected with. It's not supposed to be cold. That said, you got to start somewhere. So you're sort of on your own to take the risk, and the risk is simple. The risk is if enough people flag you as, hey, this is junk, or I want to unsubscribe, then yes, the CRM will reach out to you and say, hey, reminder, you're not supposed to be doing this. So, Bill McNitt, did you have a question?
Now, just to follow on with your comment on sort of filters, size of deals would be a filter. If you have, no experience in large public companies, and that's what the PE firm is looking at, probably want to avoid that. Their investment approach, uh, firms might be looking at distressed deals. If you've never been in that area, that'd be another filtering aspect. Often have found that people have approached private equity firms through other people that they know, or people that they know at the portfolio companies, or maybe what college or business school that they went to, or what industry group that they may be a part of.
Yes. Excellent advice, Bill. Thank you. So it's right on cue, and he's helping me move the process along. So not only sector alignment, but also size of deals, situational focus. So every private equity group has a different area of emphasis or interest. Um, you can look at the management team or the operating partners. You can read the bios of the deal team and decide if it looks like you would be relevant for them or not. You can read their criteria, their investment approach, and their brand. There's not a whole lot of transparent feedback the way there is on Glassdoor, for example, of companies, but you can sometimes get lucky and find some background, positive or negative, about a private equity group, and they describe their process, and then you can discern what some of the needs may be. We're going to get to that in a slide, in a few slides, but this is all helpful for you to decide, is it worth my time and effort to reach out to these folks, or are they just too far afield from my area of interest or expertise? So a really good way, everything that Bill mentioned about centers of influence, people you might have in common, people that might provide a warm introduction, you know, college alumni in common, all that's relevant. The single best way for you to get a private equity group to take your call, cold, not knowing you, or open an email if they don't know you. Some of you have heard me say this many times before because I believe it very strongly. But if you can develop an investment thesis, it will open doors for you, particularly if in the subject line of your email you say something like, I've been working on an investment thesis that I'd like to bounce off of you, or an investment idea or theme. What is the definition? We could do a whole session, an hour-long session on the actual definition of an investment thesis. But for now, let's keep it simple and just say, if you can take an industry or market segment that you know well, combine it with a customer segment that you know well, and then a trend, a dynamic, a driver, a change, a shift. Maybe it's technology, maybe it's driven by something else, and you can invent something new and novel and different that pleases customers, then you've invented something that we could call an investment thesis. So in other words, if we pull together, if we do one company that's pretty big that does this, and we add in these services, these capabilities, these channels, and this technology, for example, then we're going to make their customers very, very happy because we're solving for several unmet needs. If you can articulate that, um, you don't have to have an acquisition target in hand. You just sort of have to articulate the idea. Private equity groups will be very pleased and will be impressed and may kind of keep you around as a river guide or executive in waiting. They're not going to compensate you until they have a deal, but they would be much, much more likely to keep you in mind to hire you as a W-2 employee than if you just sent out a cold outreach without this concept of an investment thesis. It's not required, but I think we all know cold outreach to private equity is very, very, very challenging, which is why we're having this conversation today. Okay.
So Kit, just a question about that. So um, I guess if you go there, with some pretty good ideas, but without target companies in mind, you're saying that they will still, or there's a good chance that they will at least take that as a positive.
There's a risk, of course, Jonathan. The risk
Right.
is that they say, "Hey, this is really interesting. Thanks very much. Don't call us. We'll call you. We'll be in touch." And then they take it and run with it, right? That's a real risk. It happens.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at the alternative, and the alternative is they're not calling me back. They're not, I don't even know if they're opening my email. I really, really want to be in their face because these guys are perfect for me. This could be a good way to establish. Remember our goal. Our goal is to start a relationship, develop a connection with somebody, and this is a good way to start that process to answer your question. Not without risk, but
But you don't think they necessarily expect you to be providing them names to contact right away.
no, you don't need to do that. And in fact, I've advised some of the operators in our community that it may be a good idea at the point where you get to, introducing a company, to ask them to sign something that just says, look, you're not going to do this deal without me, right?
Right.
Or what's the alternative to that? The alternative to that would be, you'll compensate me something if you take this deal and run with it and don't hire me to be the CFO or whatever, right? That I expect a referral fee, and they'll pay that.
Right.
So as we think about marketing, we're really striving to solve problems for these groups. I can't remember who it was that talked about that. But at the end of the day, we're looking for ways to get to know these potential clients, customers, hiring decision makers, however you want to think about them, better and better and better over time. So once you've got your narrow list of a limited number of perfect fit private equity groups, track the trends, changes, dynamics that are impacting their portfolio, pay attention to developments, identify potential problems they might be facing. And so in your outreach, you can mention some of the concerns that they're facing, some of the problems, some of the dynamics, some of the pressures, some of the, what am I trying to say, headwinds that they might be facing in their portfolio companies. Be relatable, and offer to help. And sometimes it can be helpful to think outside the box and say, listen, you're investing in medical device manufacturing. There's a conference in Dallas next week. I expect that you're going to be there because it's a relevant conference for you. If that's the case, I will be as well, and I'd love to meet you. Let's carve out some time. And that's a really good way to do that as well. Just assume that they will be at that conference. I've also had success myself in saying, and I'm making this up, I'm literally making this up. Um, I see that you're in Salt Lake City. Your offices are in Salt Lake City, and it looks like you're in the Salt Lake City office. I'm planning to be in Salt Lake City towards the end of August. I'd love to connect with you. And if you're not going to be in town, maybe you could refer me to somebody who will be in the office. I'd welcome the opportunity to connect with you for half an hour. And if they say yes, if you get one other person in, I don't know why I thought of Salt Lake City just now, but if you get one other person to say yes in Salt Lake City, then maybe it's worthwhile for you to pay for the plane ticket to go to meet with them in person in their office. So it's a good approach. Now the problem that you do sometimes face is that they've committed to a meeting and then at the last minute they say, "Hey, I'm really sorry, something else just came up," and you've paid for a plane ticket. You want to get to the point where you're able to offer tangible, logical, coherent, credible suggestions for them, for their portfolio companies, ways to solve problems. And that's really where we're heading right now. And this is something interesting. So I've done some research. The top 10 problems that private equity professionals face in their portfolios. Anybody want to guess about maybe just toss one out. What's a typical problem or frustration or pain point that a private equity professional faces? I might have to call on Bill McNitt again if nobody jumps in.
What they
One of the
buy.
Anybody?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say what they buy is not what they've been sold.
Yeah.
Meaning they are sold a ready company for the big league, and it's nowhere near it.
Yes, that's a good one. That is relevant. It's probably not on my list, but I've written about that myself. Very true. Anybody else?
Some
Maybe
culture issues.
Vulture issues, okay. What else?
I have issues with compliance issues, that undiscovered compliance issues.
Yes, yes. And Debbie, do you work inside a private equity fund?
No, I work for the individual companies they buy. The last 4 jobs it's been through private equity. They've been bought, carved out from a private equity, and I build it back together.
Yep. Okay, good. Any others?
Yeah,
uncooperative senior stakeholders.
Very good. Very relevant. Yes.
yeah. One was how to create value, right? From the how to get value from this investment.
Yes. Okay, good. So a lot of these pain points or frustrations that you're going to see me populate here are really referring to first time PE backed, where they had been founder led, and now they're trying to incorporate change in the management team. And but I think everything you guys shared is spot on. So lack of urgency, unclear or incomplete, or sometimes too verbose communication, a lack of strategic focus, weak command of the financials, that wouldn't be any of you, reluctance to make tough calls, confusion over decision rights and governance, thin skin, being defensive, um, not executing in every area the way they said they would, a lack of operating rhythm, and then culture fit issues. But I like what everybody said. Those are all relevant. Okay. So let's just think about that. If any of those 10 areas of pain that are acknowledged, that are widely known, plus the ones that you shared, if any of them are areas that you feel comfortable with, that you could help turn into an aspect of your value proposition, your personal brand statement, an area that you could sink your teeth into and help in, just remember what you're trying to do is solve a problem. So if you can incorporate that, great. What are their value creation dilemmas? So this is my vernacular. I've created this list of 6 value creation levers. Nobody else on the planet thinks about it exactly the same way. But if we got into the weeds and defined these, I think everybody would say, yeah, okay, that all makes sense. So the first one is alignment. In other words, ensuring that there is a communication protocol, there is decision rights that are understood, everybody's on the same page, thinking the same way, marching in the same direction. So that's what we mean by alignment, alignment internally and with the board. Operational improvement, financial data reporting and analytics is your domain. That's third. And then you can see the others. Now, if we just take the financial piece and blow that out, the sub levers, again, I made this up. And, if you have any pushback or suggestions for me, I'd love to hear it. Send it to me, kit@theoperators.pe. But the purpose of this slide is to arm you with opportunities to say, aha, that's something I can really create my value proposition, my personal brand around. So let's say, whoops, sorry about that. Let's say scenario planning, sensitivity analysis is an area of comfort and strength and an area you're good at. And if you could combine that with strategic focus and prioritization or follow through or something of that nature, craft your story around how you solve problems for private equity, because that's really, at the end of the day, what this is all about. You're demonstrating how you can be relevant to them by solving their problems or helping them solve their problems is a more articulate and better way to say it. Because if we look at this chart, look at the green box. Who is the hero of the story? Anybody want to jump in for me? It's a little bit of a trick question. When you're describing your story about your superpower or how you can solve problems, you are not the hero of your story. You need to remember you are their solution. You're their toolkit. You are their Sherpa. You're their guide, their Yoda, however you want to think about it. So you want them to put themselves into this story as the hero, and they're going to be the hero because they decided to hire you, and you are the best person to solve that particular problem for them. So tell your story, but remember to enable them to think of themselves as the hero, and you're really the solution provider. So when you start developing content, which is really important when you're networking, someone brought up the point, maybe it was Jeffrey, about, networking is so, what's the right word? Disparate, amorphous. You've got networking from a LinkedIn standpoint, and we've got conferences and events and cold emails and calls and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you're developing credibility and trust and rapport and building your brand by sharing thought pieces. You're sharing how you would solve a particular problem or how you would tackle a particular industry opportunity, right? So you're developing content to share. It's intimidating at first, but I'm going to share with you how you can get started. You just reading LinkedIn, you'll eventually you could find something that makes a lot of sense to you. It's pretty compelling. Maybe it's well written. Maybe it's exactly in your sweet spot. Ideally, it is. It's right in your lane, and you've found it, and you agree with the author. Don't just move on. Don't just hit like. Write something. And that's the easiest way for you to get started with content, is to write, I love what this person wrote because, and the only thing I would add is, and that's a good way to get started. From there, maybe you can create your own post. Maybe you can find your own article, post a link to it, and you can write the same thing. I really like this article because, and the only thing I would add is, that's fantastic. The LinkedIn 411 rule is you comment on other people's posts 4 times for every 1 time that you share something. Write do something on LinkedIn at least 4 times a week, and you'll start to be picked up more. All right. So let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn. Some of you we've only got about 5 or 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go quickly here. LinkedIn is the best place to network, but how many people do you actually know, like, and trust that you're connected to? What percentage? I'm going to actually ask you. It's not a rhetorical question. What percentage of your connections on LinkedIn do you know, like, and trust? Anybody?
I would say about 50%.
Really? Debbie, that's impressive.
I say
Well,
10%.
John, I'm more like you. Anybody else? 5%?
Yeah,
Anybody?
about 5 to 10%.
5 to 10. Okay, good. So that's what I would have expected to hear. So either Debbie knows an awful lot of people, or she's very, very discerning about who she connects with.
I was very, very discerning up until recently.
Right. So what's happened in the last couple of years is AI and spam and bots and automated sequenced outreach and so on and so forth has really taken over. And frankly, you don't even know if the person is real or not. I've seen this again and again, and it's frustrating. So one good way to solve for that is a tool that I use called My Most Trusted. I encourage you to write this down or Google it right now. My Most Trusted. It's actually free, and it's genius, and I love it. So here's how it works. If let's pick on John Ferrara for a second. John, what industry do you serve?
The professional services.
Okay.
or digital media, whatever's better for you.
Perfect. So let's assume that most of John's connections, especially the ones in that 10% that he knows pretty well, are in digital media marketing or, generally business services. And John identifies 30 people in his network that he would say, yes, I trust these people. I not only know them and like them, but I trust these 30 people. If he can mark those 30 people as trusted, and then if he can figure out a way to get those 30 people to do exactly the same thing, to indicate people that they know, like, and trust, click a little box, right? Then all of a sudden, assuming there's no duplication or overlap, and there probably would be, but we could have as many as 900 people that are in a relevant ecosystem, digital marketing or whatever it was you just said, John, that are liked people. And the reason that that's so powerful is once you have identified who your trusted connections are, and those trusted connections of yours have done the same thing, it's so easy to facilitate an introduction. It's also very, very easy to go from, um, hey, like think about the process. If I said, now I'm looking at Alex Salcedo. So if I said to Alex, Alex, you're connected with this guy, Bill. I know you don't really know me very well, but I would really appreciate it if you would facilitate an introduction for me to Bill, your friend. So I've got to write all that stuff out to Alex, and I've got to make it compelling enough that Alex might actually take me seriously and respond. And then Alex has to take the time to say, oh gosh, who is this guy? Let me look at Kit's profile. Let me decide. All right, sure, I'll do this introduction thing. And I've got to copy and paste the LinkedIn profiles for each of these two jokers. And then I got to say, here's the reason I thought you guys should meet. And it's like a frustrating kind of a time sink. But if it could all happen relatively, I hesitate to use the word automatically because now it starts to sound scary. But if I could just push a button that says, Alex, I'd like to meet Bill, and that message goes automatically to Alex, and then Alex says, oh, you want to meet Bill? You're trusted. I trusted you already, and I trusted Bill. So sure, no problem. Push a button. And then all Alex has to do is answer one question, which is, why do you want to introduce these people? And then Alex just has to write, I thought you guys should meet because you're both in the same ecosystem of digital marketing or whatever it happens to be. And that's how easy it is. And the reason it's valuable is that now you're not dealing with these unknown, random people that are asking for connections or whatever. You're dealing with real, true, trusted connections that are in your network. So that's called My Most Trusted. Within our community called The Operators, we have partnered with My Most Trusted and we've labeled it. It's sort of a white label version of My Most Trusted called The Operators Trusted Network. And then I'll get into Nolodex in just a second. So let's see. I think what I wanted to do, let me check, let me stop my share and I'm going to do a time check. We've got a couple minutes, so I'm going to try to do this on the fly, so bear with me here. I want to show you guys something. There we go. So this will be familiar to several of you. Are you seeing the screen okay? Okay. So this is our community platform at The Operator. So if you're a PE-backed executive or a former PE-backed executive, or even if you're just considering being a PE-backed executive, feel free to reach out. But it's mainly for those that have already been there and done that. And I want to show you my community, A, because I'd like you to join it, but B, because there are plenty of other online community platforms out there that enable this same sort of networking. Okay. So networking, that's the purpose of this discussion. So I'm going to show you how it works in our platform. So the newest member is always in the top left corner. We have 674 members. And let's say hypothetically, we want to meet a CEO who is in the business services industry, who has worked in companies that are $25 to $50 million in EBITDA. That's our goal right now. We could get more specific if we want. So all we do is click on add a filter, scroll to the bottom, choose a role, We already decided the role is CEO. So we want to meet CEOs. Then we add a filter, scroll down, choose an industry. We'll choose business services. And then we add a filter, scroll down. We want an EBITDA range. We want to meet those people who are working in this size range. And we could add more. We could add those that are currently, let's say, networking mindset is actively networking, so we don't bother people who don't want to be networked with. And we can choose a bunch of other filters. So we'll just leave it at that. And if we scroll down here, you can see there's probably 50 or more CEOs, 25 to 50 million business services. And then if we say, okay, wonder what Rashmi's background is, we can click and we can read about Rashmi. Now, she didn't do a very good job filling out her profile. So let's click on Doug. I think Doug filled his out in more detail. There we go. So we get a sense of the areas of interest. And so when you're doing this kind of networking, what you're looking for is, what do I have in common with this guy, Doug Tracy? Number one. Where is this guy located? Maybe we could get together for coffee or something. And thirdly, is there anything that he said here that's genuinely curious, interesting, novel, an area of interest of mine? And so, our community platform is just like a lot of others. You can message people directly on the platform, or you could go to LinkedIn, or you could send an email. But that form of networking is very, very relevant to you all because it makes it very easy to find people who are a perfect fit. Yes, John.
So one quick question. So in networking, what percentage would you say if you had to say you're going to network with people that you know, right? That are your contacts and that kind of stuff. And what percentage is this process of networking with new people, identifying new people? I mean, is it 50-50 or what's your sense of it should be?
Oh,
If you
man,
understand the
John,
question. I'm sorry.
I understand the question. I think it's a really good question, but I think it's so much depends on the stage you're in your career. If you're earlier stage, then there are going to be so many more people you don't know. And, if you're the type of position that you're networking for, like in your case, John, let's say that you really want to network your way into becoming an operating partner. It narrows things down a bit. So maybe you don't know that many operating partners, but maybe there's 50 or 75 operating partners just on this platform alone. It's very situational. Yeah, sorry. So any questions on this form of networking, whether it's in this platform or frankly, it could be an association, it could be in FANG. I mean, it could be in FENG. You could do the same sort of thing, right? You can tap into the network and you're looking for common area, what you have in common with somebody, geographic proximity, or an area that you're genuinely intellectually curious about that you'd like to kind of bounce a question off of. And if you're genuine and sincere about it, then you'll get the opportunity to chat with somebody. And remember, what's the goal? It's not a job. The goal is to develop a connection, a relationship. Okay. So we're out of time. I had another slide or two, but we're out of time. So let's just be respectful of our time commitment to one another. The only other thing I was going to share had to do with we have something called the Collective inside our community platform, which is a referral or lead sharing kind of concept. There's software called Nolodex that allows leads to be shared and for people who are sharing leads to get compensated for that. But there are other networking groups that facilitate those lead shares. And one purpose of a lead share is for a job. And there are ways to get compensated for introducing people that leads to somebody else getting a job. So I just wanted you to be aware that all of that is out there and relevant for you under the umbrella heading of networking.